All right. Hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Friday, September 27th, 2024. This is your afternoon tropical update. We're going to be talking about the rest of the Atlantic Basin today. After Helene, where do we go from here? What's next? And a lot of people are already talking about our next potential system in the Caribbean Sea. So we're going to spend a lot of our time on that. We'll quickly hit the rest of the tropics. Of course, though, the effects of Helene are still being felt today across the southeast U.S. Hurricane Helene made landfall last night in the Big Bend of Florida, just south of Perry. The maximum sustained winds were 140 miles per hour. It was a very powerful and extremely large Category 4 hurricane that was moving in at a very high rate of speed. The storm had a central pressure of about 938 millibars, and most of our data indicates that it was intensifying up to or very close to its landfall point. Over here on Facebook, we have a good update from Crown Weather Services, Rob Lightbound's page. He's a very good source of weather information. He has a very good summary he just posted about 28 minutes ago. Generally, some of the big hits, the 15-foot, 20-foot surge is certainly going to verify along the Big Bend, Steinhatchee, Cedar Key, Keaton Beach. There are some areas that have completely slabbed homes, total devastation in that area. The wind damage up into Perry and Madison, and then even into Valdosta and Alma, Georgia, where wind gusts were over 100 miles an hour, like 70 miles an hour from the border, or 70 miles rather, from the border of Georgia and Florida. There's also a absolutely catastrophic flash flooding emergency ongoing across parts of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee. There are currently 12 catastrophic flash flood emergencies in effect for the Appalachians. And I don't think people quite grasp the criteria that the National Weather Service has to issue a flash flood emergency versus a flash flood warning is very stringent. So the fact that 12 of these are active right now, it is, to put it lightly, the most about as dire of a weather situation as you're ever going to see across the United States in modern times. Roads are cut off, cell phone towers are destroyed, creeks, dams, rivers are overrunning their banks. There are people on the roofs of hospitals in counties that are trying to be rescued by the National Guard. It is full scale, every hand on deck type things going on across western North Carolina. And then into the hills of Tennessee, and then across North Georgia as well. And even though the rainfall has largely stopped this evening thanks to dry air, all this water that fell over the last couple of days is still trying to get out, and it's still flowing into this higher terrain. And the flooding threat will continue for hours, if not days, after this event, as more dams have to be released to relieve pressure to prevent even more catastrophic flooding. That will have to trigger its own potentially catastrophic flooding. So the death toll right now, according to Rob over here, is up to 47, 18 in Georgia, 17 in South Carolina, 9 in Florida, and 3 in North Carolina. So you can see that a lot of the deaths, and I kind of thought this might be the case, where most of the deaths were actually more into Georgia and South Carolina, where there was just such a bigger population of people and so much weather got so far north so fast. It's just, and those numbers are going to go up as search and rescue continues. So overall, guys, Helene was an unbelievably powerful hurricane. It'll be one of the most impactful hurricanes in U.S. history in the last couple of years, and that record book just keeps getting filled up with more Gulf Coast disasters. And, like Ida in 2021 had a major after flooding a threat. Ida was more in the northern U.S., but Helene will have her own mark on history and certainly will be retired. You will never hear Helene used to name a tropical storm in the Atlantic again. As we look across the rest of the basin here today, we do have Hurricane Isaac to the north. It became the 6th hurricane of the 2024 season, well off to the north, riding along that nice temperature gradient in the North Atlantic. This system is going to eventually begin to recurve into the jet stream. No threat to land, not even to the islands out here to the north of Africa. Definitely not going to be any significant threat to the U.S. at all. It's moving the wrong way. A little small hurricane, just doing its thing. We also had Tropical Storm Joyce form today, the 10th named storm of the 2024 season. This is going to quickly begin to recurve north. We can see the frontal system coming down towards Joyce already, and the wind shear already starting to affect the small cyclone. This will also have no impact on the U.S. We are watching another tropical wave that's beginning to leave Africa. We're getting late in the season for a wave to make it all the way across the Atlantic and the MDR. Things are becoming more hostile, as you can see, with Joyce trying to figure that out. Models have some small indication this might try to ride a bit further south. Sometimes there's more of a sacrificial storm, and the next one can kind of get up under where that one went. We'll see how it plays out, but that one's a long ways away, and I'm not really worried about it right now. So that turns our attention to the Western Caribbean, where we have, as you look at it, a pretty active pattern going on right now. We can still see broad rotation across the Southern Caribbean Sea. Remember, Helene has been moving north for a few days now. So this area of the region has been able to begin to restart. We can see a portion of the monsoon trough, and then a tropical wave has made itself a little bit past Puerto Rico today. So we have a tropical wave beginning to juice up into the monsoon trough, and we're going to generally see the same rough pattern that gave us Helene. Now, I say that with a huge, like a boulder of salt sitting next to me, that we're not expecting another repeat of Helene. The Helene was a multiple combination of very unfortunately timed weather impacts and features. So right now, there's no indication we have another Category 4 coming for Florida or anything, but it's the same general setup with the monsoon trough digging around down here. So we're going to show you kind of the Hurricane Center's map. Again, Isaac, not a threat. Joyce, not a threat. This thing, long way away. So Hurricane Center right now, 0% in the next 48 hours. So we're not talking about a weekend event. We're talking about into next week. 7 days, just 30%. So that typically means the Hurricane Center is thinking more mid to end of this time frame. So we will see how this plays out. And you can see generally they're drawing this area from the Southern Caribbean up to about, again, Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. But this one curves a little more towards the Yucatan. So there's potential that this one might start off a bit further west than Helene did, with some potentially more direct land interaction. Those are the cones for those two. Again, not an issue. Current satellite or current NHC TFAB analysis does show that monsoon trough energy in this region and the tropical wave moving a wind from Puerto Rico. So again, all this is going to juice up the area, and you're going to start seeing more background rotation, and then eventually something may try to pull out of that Southern Caribbean and move along the coast of Central America and towards the Yucatan Peninsula. That's the general thought from our computer models, looking at both the European and GFS ensembles through the beginning of the next weekend. So this is valid late Friday or early Saturday on October 5th. The Euro shows low pressures moving into the kind of central to western Gulf of Mexico, and the GFS a little bit stronger and a little bit faster. Typical biases at play here, showing a potential storm moving into the central or maybe the central western Gulf of Mexico, and then starting some kind of gradual recurve. So looking at the overall pattern, one of the things we have to actually do is go out to the Western Pacific. We have three active storms rather at this hour, although a Cimarron's final warning was issued. But we're really talking more about Jebi and TD20, whatever that'll be named. TD20 forecast to become a powerful typhoon over the next few days near the southern islands of Japan, but eventually is expected to recurve over Japan. And Jebi also expected to recurve in the next couple of days. Why am I mentioning this, talking about a storm in the Caribbean Sea? Well, large-scale weather patterns this far out are going to govern what our system eventually does, because what we kind of have right now is, on one hand, we have at least a kind of moderate signal that a weak depression or storm should be forming by the middle of next week across the Yucatan. So we kind of have our seed already in place. And the question will, of course, be, what is the upper level weather pattern doing? Is it going to be welcoming for the storm to move north? Is it going to shunt it to the west? Is it going to destroy it with wind shear? What would be the upper air pattern? But if I'm talking about the upper air pattern at the end of the first week of October, sitting here on, again, September 27th, that means I have to look really far out. And again, this is why our computer models don't always do this very well in the long term, but they definitely are good enough at this point to give us some indication. So one of the things we see is in the Western Pacific, when we have systems like this is Jebi and whatever will be named TD20, moving into the long wave weather pattern. Remember, our weather at our level, the jet stream moves west to east globally and just continuously moves in these waves, right? So this will eventually eject a bunch of mass and energy and moisture and warm air into the jet stream pattern. It's called wave breaking, where it'll cause a chain reaction to the jet stream. And this happens all the time. This isn't like some unbelievable event or anything, but it will modify weather patterns down the road, and computer models sometimes pick this up well, sometimes they don't. So we can see both those lows starting to recurve, a very strong system here. So the first system gives it its own kick, and then the much larger kick comes from the mass out ahead of TD20. And then what you can see is, as all this travels downstream, this begins to create a chain reaction of waves where you have ridges and you have troughs starting to elongate and enlargen in response to that event. So what is all this? What are we driving at here? Well, we need to look at the large-scale upper air pattern going into the middle of next week. This is the GFS deterministic showing a strong ridge of high pressure generally over the western U.S. with a strong trough over the eastern Pacific, northern eastern Pacific, the Aleutian low kind of a little bit displaced. And then you also have, or not the Aleutian low, but the Pacific Northwest, the low coming out the Pacific Northwest there. And you don't have a strong trough signal, really. You have kind of a trough moving over New England at this point on the deterministic model. European kind of showing the same thing, but this large ridge is the curious feature. This goes all the way up into Canada. And if that were the case, I could see this trough eventually being stronger on future model runs. In fact, if we look at the ensemble predictors for these models, both ensembles, EPS, GEFS, and even the CFS weeklies all have a trough of some kind over the eastern U.S. And what this means is there should be an opening somewhere along the Gulf Coast, assuming this pattern were to hold, that would allow our system to come north. If all this orange here was, say, moved over and this was kind of like this, we would be more confident that this is probably going to just move into Mexico. But I don't think that's the indication right now. If we look at the ensembles and long-term trends, that it does look like there will be some kind of weakness open. Now, there's kind of two ways this might play out, given looking at the GFS and Euro more deterministic runs. So we kind of have the pattern setting up here. We have already the background rotation roughly set. We have our tropical wave coming in to kind of help juice all this up. The left arrows have Helene moving away here on the GFS on tropical tidbits. We step this forward through the weekend and into next week, and we kind of have a broad low pressure beginning to form in the Southern Caribbean. Now, I'm a little skeptical of the GFS because sometimes it will spuriously send vorticity out of like Venezuela and northern South America that doesn't actually exist. So I don't know how this would actually seed just yet, but assuming this is true, because the Euro shows the same thing, so I'm going to go ahead and buy it from the GFS right now, but I'm buying it kind of like giving them the side eye a little bit. But assuming something like this does form, we see a low pressure trying to work up the coast, very close to Central America, and then we have this kind of lopsided wave or weak system moving into the Yucatan by late next week, by Friday, Thursday, late next week. And then what it looks like is a high will be moving off the coast of the southeast U.S., and it looks like this will be trying to come in on the backside ahead of what looks like another trough coming in from the south. So it looks like the window would be more towards Texas or the central Gulf Coast, but again, we're talking very broad strokes here. We're not talking Louisiana or Houston or Alabama at this time. It's not like that yet. We're just talking about broad patterns. So that is kind of what the GFS shows, and Euro in an agreement to a point. The Euro kind of shows the same thing. Low pressure starting to work up the middle of next week. By the end of next week, something comes up. Now, in the Euro's case, it pulls it north faster and it almost rotates it back over Florida more as a rainmaker. And that might be all this is. I mean, it's being optimistic at this point. It very well could be a tropical storm or a hurricane. But, it'll largely depend on the upper environment as well, too. Is the upper air pattern for Helene was like custom ordered. Like I couldn't make a better upper air pattern than I could for Helene. So that may not very well be in place because the upper weather system that captured Helene was very unusual in itself. We're not likely to have another giant cutoff low sitting here rocketing this out of the Caribbean. It's just probably not going to happen again. But it's still the Gulf of Mexico in October. You cannot count out these systems either. So again, I guess the messaging here is, yes, we have some indication that we're going to get something slowly forming towards the middle to end of next week in the Western Caribbean Sea. We figure it's going to probably pull north into the Gulf of Mexico, and the upper air pattern over the kind of western to central Gulf Coast, maybe even more towards Florida, is going to be somewhat open, most likely, for something to move north. This is not likely to just run straight into Mexico. Short term, it could. If it catches it just the wrong time, a little cold front passes, and then it just goes, it could happen. But the betting favorite right now would be for this to move more northward. Could be some potential impacts towards late next week or next weekend. And that's pretty much all we've got right now, guys. So that's what I've got for you today. We're going to continue to track this system. I may take a day or two off from the videos, and we'll just maybe pick it back up when we've got more things to watch. Because honestly, just flipping through GFS models for the next couple of days isn't going to do anybody any good. As things begin to consolidate and we begin to see those typhoons recurve going into early next week, we'll start getting some better ideas. Our models did very good with Helene. So, we're going to just watch it as it comes. So that's what I got for you guys today. Thanks for the Facebook Live support, and the stuff on the page, guys. It's been awesome. We're over 2,000 followers now, and I hope to keep growing it. Appreciate y'all's support, and we're going to keep doing this to the rest of hurricane season. Hopefully I don't have to do this more often for the rest of the year, but we'll see. Until then, guys, stay safe. Thanks for watching. Check on your friends and family and relatives up in the Carolinas and Georgia and Tennessee. It's a bad time up there, and of course, if they're in Florida, make sure they're okay too. So that's what I got for you guys today. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.